Hello, this is Cassie. Welcome back for another Heffy Doodle video. Today we're going to be making 3 fairly easy cards using one color palette. So let's talk about what we're going to be using. We're going to be using the Wingman stamp and dies, love those, and we're going to be using the Silver Linings cloud border dies, along with the fancy Foliage stencil. All 3 of our cards are going to be using the same basic principles. So we're going to start with some Bristol smooth cardstock along with the Silver Linings cloud border die. You could skip this step if you wanted to, but I love all the added texture that it adds to the background. And I love that this Silver Linings cloud border has the stitching on both the top and the bottom when you cut it. So I'm lining that up and I'm just using some washi tape that I have on hand and tacking that down. I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine, and I'm going to do that for all 3 pieces of cardstock that I have. So once those are all cut out, I'm going to keep those together. So I'll peel off my dies and then line those back up on the next one, just making sure that I keep all those pieces for each one together. Our next step would be to grab all the pieces for one card panel, and I'm putting this onto my media mat just to grip the pieces each a little bit better. And I have one of my mini ink blending tools along with a Minty ink, and I'm sponging that all over the sides of each of those pieces. Like I was saying earlier, if you wanted to skip using the Silver Linings cloud border die, you very much could. It would make your whole process that much easier, but I really do love the added texture that adds, especially while adding the sponging to it. And then it just gives this beautiful ethereal cloud background, which is just, I don't know. I'm all about backgrounds. If you watch me at all, you know I love backgrounds. So I'll finish that for all 4 of the pieces for each panel. And then when I'm done with that, I'm going to flip them over because we need to tack them together. I don't want to attach them to my card base just yet. So I'm just going to use a little bit of purple tape to tack down these pieces. You could very well skip this step and just go ahead and tack it down to your card front or your card base if you really wanted to, but I didn't want to do that yet, mostly because I'm always afraid I'm going to screw something up. So I decided to just tack it together with a little bit of purple tape. Scotch tape would work, whatever you might have on hand like that. Washi tape as well. So once that's all tacked together, I'm going to flip it over, and here's where I'm going to grab the fancy Foliage stencil. I just want even more texture on that background, so I'll grab a little more purple tape to try and make sure that my piece stays where it's supposed to. It doesn't stick that well to the media mat, but it does stick well enough. And then I'll put a little bit of purple tape on the top to make it a hinge if I need it. And then I am only going to do some very light sponging all around the edges using that fancy Foliage stencil. And it doesn't look like much right now. That's how stencils usually work for me. And I'm even guessing, you know, like, oh, I wonder how much pressure I'm putting. But when you peel it back, I love the way that looks. It's so cool. So I'm going to do this particular thing for each of the other panels. I went ahead and stamped out all of my images using some Memento Tuxedo black ink onto some Express It cardstock. And now I am going to start my first bit of coloring. So I've got G00, and I'm only going to be putting it on the faces of these 2 birds. And I will do it on another one of the birds, but this kind of brings in that minty color. As I said, I wanted to stick with greens, oranges, and blacks. And then we're going to come in with, this is our main color for all the birds. It's the YG09. And so that's our main color for all the birds. I'm putting down a wash of my light color. That's how I typically like to color. I go lightest to darkest. I know that everybody's a little bit different. Some people like to go darkest to lightest, and it all depends on what I'm coloring, I guess. Sometimes I will do it that way as well, but this is my typical go-to, lightest to darkest. Try out all the options and see what works best for you. And then I'm going to come back in with my YG09 and lighten that up just a little bit. And then we'll move on to his beak. And so we'll be using YR04 and YR07. All right, just adding a little bit of shading with that. And I love the contrast that the green and the orange are together. It just pops. So now moving on to our next bird, I'll do the same exact thing. Like I said, I'm not going to show you the coloring for all the birds because it is basically the same. But I find that this is, for me, a super fun way to make a bunch of cards. And it's easy and mindless. I don't have to think about too much. I pick a color palette, like in this case, orange, green, and black. And then I am able to just kind of create, and I can kind of zone out, either watch other YouTubes or maybe listen to a podcast or listen to some music or whatever the case may be, chat with one of my kids, FaceTime, you name it. But this I find is just a fun, easy way for me to make several cards. So I'll stamp out all the images a couple times, color them all, and that way I've got plenty of images for several cards along with several of the insides as well. So moving on to this little dancing bird, he's just the cutest. We're doing the same thing, and then we'll and I'm only showing you this so that you can see where I put my shadowing and shading, which in all honesty, as with all of my coloring, I typically don't have a light source. I'm just putting down some shading where I think it looks good, and then blending it out again. But try this. Try the whole, pick a color palette and use all the stamps in a stamp set and see what you can come up with. I find that to be so satisfying and so much fun, especially when I've used all the images in a set. All right, moving on to his face, it's the same basic concept, and then his beak will be the exact as the others as well. He's just so cute. And then I'll color everything else, and then we'll pull out the matching dies, and then we'll tack those down with a little bit of purple tape as well. Washi tape would work fine too. I just try really hard, even with the purple tape, not to go over the image too much. I have found that even with the purple tape, sometimes that still will stick, and it also really depends on your paper, but it sometimes sticks and it will tear the paper, and that's a no-go for me. So just be careful. All right, they're all cut out, and now I'm going to move on to stamping my sentiments. I have a piece of Oreo Crunch cardstock by Heffy Doodle, and we're going to take pretty much almost all the sentiments, and we're going to stamp those all on this piece. I did use a magic powder bag to start, so I don't have any stray powder sticking where I don't want it, and I'm just basically stamping all along the bottom here first. And I'm using VersaMark ink. It's a clear sticky ink, and I am going to go ahead and do the powder next. And my reasoning for that is it is a clear sticky ink, but it can dry, not super quick, but I didn't want to stamp all my images and risk the potential for some of that ink drying, so that way the powder wouldn't stick. So we'll go ahead and do each line, and then stamp and color with the powder the way we need to do that. And then I'll pull out my guillotine trimmer, and I'll use this to trim down all of my sentiments. This does take a little bit of time, and you have to line it up a little bit, and not all of mine are perfectly straight, but that is okay. Now I'm ready to start adhering all of my little images to the fronts of my card panel. So I'm going to use some foam tape on the back of my images along with my sentiments that I plan to use. I'll peel off the release paper and stick those down. Just moving along with each of those. And this part to me is so much fun because then you really see everything come to life. So peeling off that release paper. And I love how that black and the white just kind of pop with the green and the orange. And then we'll stick down our two little birds flying across there, and now we'll work on the inside. I have a card base that is a 130-pound card base, and we're going to just use some liquid glue to adhere down our pieces to the inside. You wouldn't want to use any foam tape on the inside of here because you want it to be flat. And then I'll tack down my sentiments. I love that. You and I are like birds of a feather. Birds of a feather stick together. And then I'll take one of the other birds and I'll glue him down to his little, I don't even know what you call that, but he'll be sitting on there. And I'm going to grab my T ruler along with a black pen. This is a multi-liner by Copic. And that way I can draw a nice straight line. And that'll finish off the inside. And then I'll use that same liquid glue to adhere down my card front to my card base. And then we'll use that same liquid glue to adhere down his little feathers and things too. So that way there's those little feathers popping all over the place. Which is so fun. And I will basically just design all the cards sort of the same way. And then as a final bit of embellishment, I'm just going to grab some little green gems and clear gems. And we're going to be pretty liberal sticking all those down with my crystal katana and my liquid glue. And I love how these are turning out. And so once I get all of those put down this way, that is going to end up finishing off all the cards. But I love how this color palette just really works. And so there are 3 fairly quick cards using the same basic principles. Let's take a look at each one. How fun, huh? And it was just quick. Once you figure out your colors that you want to use, you can just go, go, go. And you can make so many cards this way. Probably could have made even a bunch more. Happy bird day. Shake your tail feathers. All right, so if you liked this video, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And be sure to hit that notification bell down at the bottom so that you don't miss anything new. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I will see you very soon in another video. Bye, everybody.